Hey guys, welcome to another BrokenGrandAm. Today is brakes. We're going to cover pads, rotors, calipers, and then we'll touch base on the rubber line that goes from the hard line to the caliper itself. Brakes, obviously it's a maintenance item. Right off the bat, if you're getting a squealing sound from your brakes, whether it's moving or while pressing, more than likely your pads are low. Brake pads come with like a notch on the side that is lower than a full pad, but just above no pad. And basically it's designed to squeal and let you know that your pads are getting low. Now the little notch I was talking about is this little thing off the back. So it sits just above what would be flat, metal to metal basically. So as soon as you hear that screeching noise, that's this guy hitting the rotor. Now there's quite a few different things that could be going on with brakes. Some minor, some major. So we just kind of run down a list of problems, and then I'll throw in different kind of fixes that go along with it. A soft and low pedal can be related to the fluid itself, whether it's low, whether you have a broken line that needs addressed. Your pulsating pedal is pretty much related to a warped rotor. Something else to look for, if when you brake and your car kind of darts to one side or the other, that could be related to a stuck or seized caliper. If the piston goes out and happens to get seized like that and it's not moving freely anymore. The slides themselves can become rusted and not move if not properly taken care of. And then the rubber line I mentioned that goes from where the hard line ends into your caliper to allow for flex and whatnot. Those can get old and swell on the inside. So exterior you wouldn't see anything wrong, but the inner lining can actually swell from age and old fluid. I'm going to go detail through the front, and then I'll show you the rear disc setup, because it's the same idea as the front, just kind of smaller and different bolt sizes. So we'll cover like the bolt sizes and whatnot on that, and I'll show you the difference on the back caliper. Another thing, when you're doing brakes, honestly anything, brake, suspension, if you're doing one side, do the other two. It's just good practice. You're just asking for trouble if you don't, especially with brakes, because if you change one side, not the other, now one side has brand new and a different profile of grabbing. The other side can start compensating for it. Then you end up with a seized caliper and the snowball just rolls on. So one side note too, for the fronts, this will work for both GT and SC. The brakes are all the same. It's the same part number for your calipers, for your pads, for your rotors. The back, only GT's got the rear disc. So obviously, if you're having SE, you've got drums in the back, this is not going to apply to you. As always, use your safety jack stands. I should have to mention that, but I do, because people don't. So let's jump into it, and it's going to be an easy one, guys. We're going to remove the caliper. So basically, I'm kind of merge everything together here. We'll talk about this line real quick. So basically on the back, you'll have an 11 millimeter going in to the caliper. If you're changing calipers, go ahead and remove that first and get that out of the way. And then you remove the caliper, because more than likely it's going to be on there pretty tight. And if you remove your caliper, you're going to lose that leverage. So 11 millimeter there, you're going to have 12 millimeters on your actual caliper. Now, depending on how hard they're on there, the slides have a notch, so you can either grab a pair of pliers or a wrench, and you can hold that while you loosen this guy. It'll make it a little easier for you. When you take your line off, watch for the washers that are on there. Also be prepared for brake fluid to fall out. So get yourself a little basin or some kind of bucket. That way you don't make a mess everywhere. Don't worry about saving it, because if you're messing with brake fluid, you lose some and want to put some in, always put new stuff back in, never try to reuse. Because more than likely, the stuff in your car has never been changed. So basically this is called a banjo fitting. Now on here, are little washers. If you're taking off the line and redoing it, get new washers. I found some on Rock Auto, like 40 cents a piece, so not a big deal to change those, and it's just another good measure. Make sure you don't have problems down the road. So then we got that off to the side. We'll go ahead and take the caliper all the way off. And that's what your caliper looks like. Now would be the time, or if you're changing the caliper, so now would be the time, make sure it's compressed all the way. You need to put it back on. So next we come to pads, which here's a horrible set of pads. So next we're going to tackle 213 millimeters here to get your bracket off. Now these bolts are notorious for being stripped out because people don't use the right size or try to use a 1/2 inch versus a 13. My advice, and what always worked for me, is heat and bolt extractors. So basically, I've got a little torch, a little handheld torch basically. Heat up the whole area really, really well. And bolt extractors are basically a socket that have like a twisty grip in there, and they're designed to grab just about anything. And then you would just kind of slowly work it out. Okay, so there's your caliper bracket. Here's where the slides are. Oh, you can see that's nice and dry. So I'll come back to that later. You're going to set that aside. And then now, so this guy's on there pretty well. Now at this point, if you weren't changing rotors, this is where you would stop and start putting your new stuff back on. You wouldn't even worry about taking that bracket off. For the sake of it, I'm going to show you how to get this off here. So having said that, so I wouldn't be doing this if I was keeping this rotor. But for the sake of it, we're saying we're changing it. Obviously it doesn't matter. So there's your rotor. So there's your brakes torn apart. Now, as far as this guy goes, so basically this pinch thing right here, take a flathead, that comes right off. And then underneath you'll be able to grab with a wrench, top and bottom, and you would just break that loose, and then this would fall right down the bottom. So this guy, just kind of pry him out. Okay. And that comes out. Remember the orientation, and definitely don't lose it. So this is a 12 millimeter. Basically, you just break that loose, undo that line, and that's it. So like I said, in here we the part that will swell, and then under here is where you'd be able to get, a wrench or a pair of pliers, grab onto there just in case this is so rusty that it doesn't allow you to do what I just did, which was break it loose without holding the bottom. Tie it back in. It'll go in a certain way. Go ahead and thread it and snug it. Put your line holder back on. Same thing if you gotta set it up and then give it a little tap, it'll fall right in place. Just like that. And that's all you gotta do to change that line. Okay, so at this point you can go ahead and put a rotor on. Make your seat in there good. Come to your bracket here. Get that threaded on. So now take your slides out. Put some grease on there. And kind of like twist as you put it back in. That'll help spread it around. Same thing with the top one. If you get new pads, it should come with new hardware here. So you just put your new ones on, you'll see the orientation, and they will just pop right into place. Here's one part where I don't see many people do this, but at this point I would put grease in the grooves, top and bottom, and then pretty much anywhere where this pad's gonna contact. At what point we go ahead and put our pads in. Put one end in first, and into the other. At this point, now if you're not messing with the line, you can leave that guy on. So if you're not changing your caliper, you could actually leave that line on and just kind of push them off to the side, or get a bucket and kind of hang them. Try not to let it hang on the hose, but you know, lay it somewhere and support it. Take one of the old pads, put it here, get yourself a C-clamp, put the stationary part on the back, and then run the other side against the pad and squeeze this back as far as it'll go. And you put that on. And just thread each one first. So head back in. We're spinning here, so grab a pair of pliers here, and then go ahead and tin it down. And if you're just doing pads and rotors, after you complete, you know, a set or all of them, you get in the car, start it, pump up the brakes a couple times, and then go ahead and start with your pad braking. So we're going to take our line, the line threaded here. Always remember orientation, how it came off. And again, you would put your new washers on. Your bleeder here is a 10mm. So if you're changing a caliper, my suggestion, so if you change a singular one, so you have it back together, go ahead and break this loose, twist it out, you know, a couple threads, make sure your reservoir is full, and go ahead and let it gravity bleed. Once you start getting a pretty good stream out of there, go ahead and close it up. And then my suggestion is go ahead and do a full system bleed. So start with your passenger rear, driver rear, come to this guy again, and then hit your driver's front with at least the gravity bleed. If you have a friend, that's even better. You can have them pump, crack the bleeder open, crack it closed, bump it up again. Keep an eye on your reservoir, make sure it's always good on fluid. And that should do it for the front brakes. Okay, so here's our rear brakes. Like I said, same idea, a couple different things. So right off the bat, you'll notice it's kind of smaller. So you still have your two caliper bolts, two bracket bolts. That gets that off of there. It's the same ordeal here. You still have your clip thing up under there. Same 12mm. Here you have 15s for your caliper, 13s for the bracket, and 13 for the brake hose. So here's where something's a little different. You know, I suggest greasing where the pad goes into the bracket, and then on the rear, the slides are actually built into the bolts. So, you know, when you reassemble, just grease the bottom part of the bolt. Same thing, kind of swirl it around, and then you'll go ahead and tighten everything back down. If you're wondering, the parking brake is actually separate. It's actually almost like a drum. It's inside here, you know, and it expands out to lock these wheels, which I have it locked right now. But yeah, so in there you have your normal kind of twisty for the drum adjustment. Not really going to cover that today. I haven't really mastered that myself, so let's talk about a couple other side things that go along with the brakes. So if you don't know already, this is your brake fluid reservoir. You see this one's empty. This got a broken line on it. You know, there's a max line. Make sure you keep it there. And then you'll see this plug right down here underneath. That's for the low fluid light. Having said that, on your dashboard, you'll have a red brake light. The red brake light will come on for a couple of different things. First off, if your fluid's low. Another one is if you pull your e-brake, it'll activate that. There's also a slight chance that if this sensor fails, it can also set that light off. I've found a good test for that is, you know, if you have fluid, you got the light on, unplug this sensor. If your light goes off, more than likely that sensor's bad. I believe it's built into the reservoir, not 100% sure, but yeah, so you need to change that. So this car actually has a broken brake line, so I find a good example here. So you see it's pretty deceiving because from there up, it's all nice and clean, and right about here it gets all nice and rusty. So what I've found actually is the first places to go where these holders are. They hold the moisture against the lines, and I've had them snap right out of there. So the 100% correct way would be to get all new lines and replace front to back. For those of us who don't have the $1 million to drop on something like that, and the odd chance that you are able to come across the pre-bent lines, they make fittings for that. So it's called our compression fittings. 3/16 is the size of our brake lines on our cars. Suggestion there is to go ahead and cut back as far as you can. You know, I keep a nice reel here of 3/16 brake line. You know, cut off what you need, bend it into place. You know, careful not to force it too bad, but you know, you can get a bender for it. You'll cut off the old line, and then basically this will just join two ends. And you'll see packages will come in two, so you go to, you know, cut here, cut there, and then you'll use fitting and fitting. So just a little bit of information there for you guys. And if you do happen to have to fix line, replace it, whatever, do a whole system bleed after you get that done. Then obviously make sure to check for leaks, make sure that fitting did what it's supposed to. Always start from your back passenger, over here, passenger front, driver front. That's a wrap on brakes. I'll put this thing back down on the floor because it doesn't really matter. Yeah, like usual, any questions, comments, if you want exact specs, let me know in the comments. I can get those to you, or find me on social media. I'll leave all this in the bottom of the description too, so see you on the next one.